Kirsten, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
As you would know from the podcasts that we've done in the past, and I hear you've listened to a few of them, I like to start by trying to understand Kirsten, the person. So could you tell us a bit about where you grew up and maybe some early influences in your childhood that led you on this path to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Sydney, in Paddington, and grew up for about 10 years of my life, the first part, around the Randwick area. So, hanging around the beaches was kind of my thing.
So where the race course is?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And then, one of three. So I have an older brother and a younger sister. And memories around there, driving around with my dad, we'd listen to Anthony Robbins in the car. So that was pretty cool. And then from there, around the time my parents divorced, I guess, we moved to the lower Blue Mountains. My mum was a single mum at that point with 3 kids, went back to work as a nurse. So saw her working, 60 plus hours to raise 3 kids. So to loop back to your question in terms of influences, definitely my mother showed a lot of strength through that. Went to school up in the lower Blue Mountains. I actually had my first job at 9 months. I realised that was the legal age to get a job.
Right.
So I handed in my application to McDonald's. I worked there till I was 18.
What happened after that?
After that, when I was 18 and finished the HSC, I quit straight away. And I think I knew, forever that lower Blue Mountains type of feel wasn't really for me. So looked for a full-time job, and the only filter, on Seek was the CBD. So any job that would take me that was in the CBD, I took. And so my first job was in real estate with Costa Coolis, which was a very successful agency in the CBD. And that was my first job as an adult.
So when did this entrepreneurial drive in you first appear? Was it when you were still growing up, early stages of your job, or was it only after you entered the full-time workforce that you realized, hey, you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Yeah.
I think looking back, it was definitely sitting in my subconscious. I was washing cars for money, doing, hustling about from a young age. But I didn't really believe, I could start a business, and it wasn't really something that I was chasing. I just wanted a full-time job at that time just to go travelling, really. But I fell into that job and met my partner, who's my partner today, so 10 years later. And he's very entrepreneurial, so he really lit the fire, I guess, with me, wanting to chase a dream, really.
That's awesome. So you met your co-founder while working at your job in the real estate firm. How did you know that it would be a good idea to get into business with someone like that?
Yeah. I worked for him, and then we ended up together. So I was working with him in his business, and it was all just a very natural flow. It wasn't really a decision that we'd be working together. And he had innovated within the real estate industry and created a digital real estate for sale sign, which was kind of separate to his real estate agency. So working there a few years, we decided to sell off the agency and focus full-time on this exciting venture and exciting innovation that he created. Yeah. So that's when we really chased that startup journey and startup life.
Gotcha. By together, do you mean together?
Yeah, we're together.
Oh, like awesome.
Together in business, together in life.
Wow,
everything.
I've got so many questions about that because it's often a minefield dealing with those kinds of relationships, but you seem to have done that really, really well.
Yeah.
So what lit the fire in you to start Designerex? Where did the inspiration for the company come from? Yeah,
so after we had sold the agency and we were commercializing this signboard business, we actually brought on a few directors to kind of help us commercialise that business, and it unfortunately that one of the directors wanted it for himself and I guess issued illegal shares to dilute shareholding and fired Costa from his own company. So that's another story in itself. Wow. But so we were in court for a few years trying to get our assets back. So going through that, which was quite a hard time, but it taught us a lot in resilience and overcoming adversity. So Designerex was really born from adversity, I guess. At that point, my spark had been lit, so my mind was open to opportunities. So I had a job at the time in another real estate agency in Potts Point. So the idea really came when I had an awards night for that agency. And I was searching for a dress, found a dress around $1,000, and was just standing in the shop just thinking, how can I justify this purchase when I know I'm only going to wear it once? So I'm just standing there trying to convince myself that for $1,000 for one wear, it's a good choice, but it just wasn't. So I went back to the office and tried to convince the girls to convince me to buy it, which didn't work. But one of the girls said, you can rent dresses on Facebook. So I went searching on Facebook and actually found the exact dress. So I actually did rent it and I had a great experience. The only thing, I had to email her my credit card details and it just wasn't secure. And then I thought, what if I want to rent another dress? I have to go digging through Facebook again. And there just wasn't a platform to be able to track and manage and receive reviews just like you do on Airbnb, for example. There was no secure end-to-end platform. So I went to Costa with my problem. We just started talking and the first thing, kind of brainstorming, and we're like, I suggested, why don't we buy 20 dresses, $20,000? And he just looked at me and thought, that's a terrible idea. That's like, You
did it anyways.
We didn't purchase. So, no, he goes, there's a better way to do this. Firstly, it's not solving the problem of opening up the wardrobes of women and to enable them to make money from their dresses. So that's when we came to the peer-to-peer model, where we're not purchasing the inventory, but we're actually extracting them from the wardrobes of women who are already buying them.
Gotcha. So what were the early days of the company like? You debated the idea, you landed on this peer-to-peer model. What were the first steps that the two of you took to actually getting the company off the ground? Yeah,
so we decided to allocate $5,000 and that's it. And we were just like, we'll see how it goes with that amount. So the first thing we did was we lodged a patent around the systems that we were going to produce. And on the back of that, we started getting quotes, I guess, and we were non-technical founders. So we just kind of did what we thought we needed to do. We got some quotes to kind of design the platform that we wanted, which was something that didn't exist. So we were kind of, having to explain a business model that didn't really exist. So that was a challenge, but very exciting. And just off the back of that, hustling around, we found an angel investor who was interested in, backing, a potentially high growth startup. Tech startup. So
I have so many questions. So usually with our guests on the podcast, we usually are able to have an idea of how they built their company because there are interviews out there and, we do a bit of LinkedIn looking up. But, your company's an enigma to me at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to peel back a few layers into that. Firstly, why start with a patent application? How's that worked out for you?
Yeah. Well, Costa had done that with his signboard and it actually proved very valuable in the fact that someone else wanted it so bad that they were willing to take it.
Wow.
But it was just the first step that we thought of and it was not something that we were going to absolutely rely on to protect us. We don't believe that. It's some paperwork that does protect you. But that was just our first step into protecting idea that we researched that didn't exist.
Did the earlier interaction with the director in your previous company influence your decision to start with a patent and protecting the IP?
I think we definitely more understood the importance of protecting your IP whether that's through a patent or protecting it in other ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned as well that you started the company on a shoestring budget of $5,000 and that the two of you were actually non-technical co-founders. So how did you manage to have an entire platform built with such limited budget?
Yeah, so after we lodged the patent, we did secure about 100,000. But yeah, being non-technical co-founders, we basically just as entrepreneurs, we just did what we thought we needed to do. So we started just talking to people about building this platform that we had in mind. And, you know, some of them suggesting building on Magento and different types of platforms and, you know, frameworks. And then we'd ask questions like, well, can we scale this? Can we integrate this type of technology? And we wanted to integrate ID verification technology, which scans a user's driver's license or passport remotely, which companies like Airbnb and EasyJet use to verify members, which ultimately creates a lot of trust in the platform. And that's something we wanted to launch with because, that was our big thing about creating a platform, is that it would be secure.
You mentioned Airbnb a couple of times. I'm guessing you take a lot of inspiration from that company.
I do, actually, yeah. And we looked at Airbnb and to get to that, when we were researching what type of platforms to go with, we did look at big scalable startups and companies, and Airbnb was one of them. And they use Ruby on Rails, and so we were like, okay, I think this is it. It's got to be custom built so we can integrate these things that we want. And so one of the guys we were talking to had a referral. He was Nepalese, and he had a referral to an up-and-coming Ruby team in Nepal. So we got a referral to them, and they built our platform from scratch.
That's amazing. A lot of people in startups who are non-technical seem to think that going the outsourced route is a good path. And a lot of them are considering, you know, having remote outsourced teams work for them as well. What was your interaction like working with the team from Nepal? I mean, was it difficult for you at all?
Yeah, it was new and different. We did have a small experience with the previous company, with the signboard, where we used India for a little bit, and we lost $5,000 over there. And so we didn't have a great experience. So we didn't seek to outsource the tech, but it just naturally evolved where we got the referral. It was a referral from a reputable person in Sydney. So we just thought we'd speak to them. They were great. They were really keen to get involved, and we kind of took it bite-sized steps. So we didn't invest too much money without getting some work back from them. So I guess we kind of had a bit of experience there in trying to manage that well.
So what was that process like? If a company came up to you today and say, hey, Kirsten, I'm thinking of outsourcing my tech development overseas, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily advise them to go and outsource it. I think it was just luck for us or not so much luck, just how it worked for us with the referral and our experience. It worked for us. But otherwise, I would maybe advise them to just put something really scrappy together, don't spend too much money, and try and get some traction early.
So one of the biggest pieces of tractions that you got in the early stages of the company was a $100,000 investment from an angel investor. How did you do that? Where did you meet this investor? How did you convince the investor to put money in your company?
Yeah, well, like I said, we met him through kind of a contact after we were looking around for people to design and build our platform. So it was through those networks where he had, I guess, contacts, and they, you know, someone kind of joined us together. He was looking for something exciting. We had something exciting that we wanted to build. And so we came together, and, you know, you tell your vision and your story and what you want to build.
You make it sound really easy, but for a lot of people, it's actually really, really hard to find an investor.
Yeah.
So what was the pitch like? Was it an elevator pitch that you gave, or?
Well, it was actually, It was actually my co-founder that met, him at the airport, I think. So it was
Wow.
kind of like, I think it's just a big build-up. You've got to hustle around. That's how we even got the connection. You've got to have, a great story and, show a bit of grit that you're willing to go all in.
So it's not just at one point in time. It was all the work that you've done before that led you up to that moment.
Yeah, that's what I believe. Yeah.
So besides that angel investor, you've also subsequently raised even more money. I think you've raised about $700,000 in seed capital and $5,000 into a second seed round. Is that right?
Not quite.
Okay.
So in total, we've raised 700,000.
So was that from another group of angel investors?
No, so that was our initial investor backing us.
Wow. Okay. Doubling down on the
Yeah,
company.
doubling down, and he was a big supporter of us expanding as quickly as possible. So, yeah, he backed us and backed our vision to go to the US as soon as possible.
And it sounds like this is a person who really believes in your company as well, this investor. What advice would you give for a startup who is considering taking money from angel investors? Because sometimes it's not easy to figure out if the investor is a right fit for you. But it seems like you've got a good fit for your company with this particular investor who's doubled down.
Yeah, definitely finding a right fit. For us, I guess he saw something in us and in our idea and how we were going to execute it. But any advice to other entrepreneurs, I think definitely if you can align your angel investors as much as possible, that also gives you the best opportunity to secure the funding, because these angel investors that you're going to target or speak to are interested in what you're doing or interested in the space. So you've got a better chance of securing that funding.
Okay, that's good advice for the people listening out there. Definitely get a fit for your investors and listen to what Kirsten just said, because she's obviously done a fantastic job raising capital. So congrats, Kirsten.
Thank you.
So we read that you're growing 100% year on year. That's an amazing amount of growth for a startup, for any company. What was your strategy to get that growth?
Yeah, and to be honest, it's mostly organic as well. We try not to spend too much on advertising, and when we do it quite strategically and make sure we make $1 back when we put it in. I guess from the beginning, we got a lot of traction from when we first launched. I guess I was the consumer. I knew what the problems were. I knew who to target and where to target them. So the early days, it was literally organic social media. I would be on there 25 hours of the day, of the 24-hour day, just hustling about organically. And I knew that's where our customer was. They were sitting on Instagram looking for inspiration and looking for products and looking for dresses, really. And that's where they were posting all their content from their events. So
social media marketing was at the core of your growth strategy. It's such a complex world these days, social media marketing, with the way that Instagram's changing likes and the different algorithms. Do you have a formula behind all this, or is there method to the madness?
Yeah. There was lots of madness, a little bit of method. This was back in 2016, so I think it was a little bit easier to kind of hustle for that traction on Instagram. I think it's slightly different now. I guess they've tailored it that way, where you have to kind of pay to get some traction. But, we moved to different methods as well, where we give every user kind of a custom URL and they put it in their bio on Instagram. So they actually drive traffic to the platform, to their own followers in their bios. So we create things like that to drive traffic to the platform.
And have the recent changes affected the way that you've approached marketing Designerex?
We've stopped the type of hustle we did at the beginning, and definitely implemented different things, such as the custom URL and tagging, and definitely. So
Designerex is a classic case of two-sided marketplace. You need a group of people who have dresses that they want to rent out, and you want to have a group of people who also want to rent dresses. And often there's this chicken and egg problem where you don't know which side of the market to start with. What was your approach to building that market?
Yeah, interesting question. And we before we launched, we knew about this chicken and egg thing for marketplaces. So we did do this really strategically. We built the platform, and then we built up some hype around it. We actually blocked off half the platform for renters. So when you went to book a dress, a pop-up would appear and it would say, "You're a bit keen, just wait, we haven't fully launched yet." But what we were doing was we were building listings on the platform. And I did that by basically calling and contacting all these little groups that were on Facebook and telling them about what we were building and how it was super secure, and we were going to drive them more renters, basically. And listing is free. So I got a lot of listings at the beginning by combining all these girls with dresses. So I built up a big bank of dresses that were on the platform, and when we had a large enough offering to go to the market, then we released the full marketplace when we'd built up, a subscriber list, and then when we drove renters to the platform, there was actually a lot of product to look at.
Right, so you're building a database of potential customers while you were building up the supply side of the business. Do you think this is a good strategy for all marketplaces, or do you think this is something specific to the industry that you're in?
I think it would be slightly different for every business or industry, but I think you could definitely apply that strategy to any marketplace. Build up the product or service, preferably in the background, and if it's free to list, there's kind of nothing, there's no negative for the people with the product or service. So build that up as much as possible, and then so when you're driving the people that want the product or service, you've actually got what consumers want in a marketplace, and that's choice, variety, and just as much selection as possible.
What was the first signs that the company was starting to blow up, and in a good way?
Yeah.
By blow up, I mean, what was the first sign that you kind of went, wow, this is really taking off?
Yeah. Well, it was pretty exciting just even the first few months. We were really excited. We were high-fiving every time a booking would come through. But now
plenty of high fives. A lot of high fives.
Now there'll be too many high fives. It was probably even just in the first few months. We launched in January, and by May we were being featured on the Today Show.
Wow.
Yeah, and we didn't even know it. They were just kind of looking at dress rental services, go-to rental services, and they featured us, and we just, at that time, we were kind of looking at our traffic a lot, and we just saw it spike. So, and we attributed that to Channel 9.
Did you ever find out how they heard about your company?
I think it was my hustling on Instagram, to be honest, because those early days, I don't think, we didn't spend anything on marketing.
Wow.
So they just did it. We didn't even know about it. So that was really exciting. National television, morning show.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And for you've obviously done a few companies before, and you've co-founded a few companies before. What's different about Designerex than the previous companies that you've co-founded? Is there a different kind of emotional attachment, or do you see untapped potential that you didn't see in your previous companies?
Yeah, well, the previous companies were pretty much founded by my partner,
Yep.
and I was, alongside that journey, which was super important for my journey and me falling into Designerex. But yeah, definitely, it's something obviously that came across my life and a problem that I wanted to solve. So I am definitely passionate about it. And yeah.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that, so you mentioned earlier to start that your co-founder is, partners with you not just in business, but in life as well. How do you manage that dynamic? Because sometimes it's, some people have a rule where they'll never ever work with their partner, whereas some other people do really well in business doing that. So how do you work that dynamic out for you? Yeah,
I mean, if I had a choice, you would probably choose not to work with your partner.
Okay.
But no, but we worked with each other before we became partners in life. So we knew how to work with each other. And that's just how it is. So you just kind of manage it the best you can. And we both are very aligned in vision for the company and in life. So that alignment definitely helps.
And how do you build that alignment?
I think, so you naturally both need to want the same things in life in terms of, pursuing a startup, for example. Not everyone wants to do that. There's an element of risk to do that. But also just flexibility and support always. So I think that's been our success so
And
far.
that mutual understanding that startup life can be a bit crazy sometimes, but do you ever commingle business talk with personal talk, or are they separate boundaries that you try to compartmentalize?
It is always mixed.
Okay.
It's just always mixed.
Rather than pretending that they're,
I mean, I tell him to get off his phone a few times, but really it's, that's our business is our life.
Yeah.
And our lifestyle is mixed with our business. So it's, it's one big mix, but just respect and support.
Yep.
And we kind of, if someone's having a low day, it's kind of the other one seems to step up. So that works well.
Awesome. Thanks for the advice. So we're jumping topics here and there, but you've now raised capital from your investor, and you've made your first international move into New York. Why decide to expand into the US? Was there a strategic angle to that?
Yeah, so going back to our build and everything of the platform, we always had a global vision. We knew it was scalable. We weren't investing in inventory. It was purely a technology business. So for us, it was global or nothing. So going to the US was kind of a matter of time for us, and with our investor backing us to go there as soon as possible. And also at the time, last year, we were accepted into the Austrade landing pad program.
Right.
So in San Francisco.
Awesome.
So yeah, within a month, we packed our bags and headed to the US and set up shop in San Francisco for a few months, just to really explore that market and know that that's the market that we want to go into.
What was the Austrian landing pad like? What was the experience?
It was incredible. They basically put you in a room with 10 other startups that want to expand as well into a co-working space, and they give you introductions left, right, and centre. And so if that's the market you want to go to and leverage as much as possible. So the landing pad did that for us.
When you got into the US, did you see any differences at all between the way that startups in Australia are run versus the way that startups are run in the US?
Yeah, I mean, going over to the US, your eyes really open up. It's a massive market. The world is so huge. We are quite small here. It's really viewed as, Australians kind of a test market and things. But for us, it's a very fashion-savvy market here in Australia. And we went there and actually got a lot of feedback that American women actually love Australian fashion. So we really brought that approach to that market. And raising capital, I think they're a bit more open to backing startups over there.
Right. People say that Australians are sometimes too hesitant to ask for what they want, especially when it comes to running a company, and that Americans are often more upfront about wanting something or needing something. Do you think that's true?
I think that's true, yeah.
And do you think that's a good thing?
I think that's a good thing. I think the American way of approaching capital, I think we definitely need to learn from. And, well, especially if you're speaking to US investors, you need to speak their language and what they're used to.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you've landed in San Francisco through the Austrade landing pad. How did you then decide to move to New York and base yourselves out of there? What was it about New York that attracted your company? Yeah,
so, well, as opposed to San Francisco, New York's very fashion dominated. So when it comes to speaking to people for our business, whether it be venture capital or even high net worth individuals or just strategic partnerships for the future, anything to do with our business, there are more people in New York that are aligned with what we're doing and are more interested in fashion and technology. So.
Sure. And when you say that you've opened up in New York, what does that involve? Did it actually involve, you physically launching a team there in New York, based out of there, to then recruit people to put their dresses on the platform and to find customers? Did it involve all of that?
Yeah, it did. And being a global company, what better place to base yourself and have your headquarters out of New York? So, we're now based out of New York, and we've got our first employee there. And we just very recently launched in the US. So,
awesome.
And we launched with 8 times the amount of listings we did here in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, so it just goes to show how big that market is and the opportunity.
Any tips for companies looking to expand to overseas?
I would definitely look at the landing pad if they're looking at expanding. It fast tracks your expansion opportunities. So I'll definitely look at that, and definitely go on like a field trip over there and just go and speak to people over there and just realize and decide if that's really the market you want to go into.
Okay. So Designerex, besides being a startup that is helping people access all these dresses, I understand that you've also got a social impact angle to your company, and that you've really got to focus on sustainability in fashion. What does that mean, sustainability in fashion?
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, I wasn't overly aware of, the impacts, but being involved in this company, we've realised that we are having a positive impact on the environment, and by circulating designer fashion, and when we see dresses being rented 30 times over to 30 different women, that's 30 different women that haven't potentially bought a fast fashion item, for example. So we think we're having a huge impact on that, and definitely when we continue to grow and scale, that could have a huge impact in reducing fast fashion purchases.
How do you think the trends in the fashion industry are changing? Because if you look at some of the largest companies in the world, these are often, like you said, the fast retailing companies, fast fashion companies, and it's sometimes really convenient for the consumer to just go to a Zara, for example, or a Uniqlo and get something off the rack. What's changing these days in making people go, hey, maybe that's not the best way to spend my money, or maybe that's not the most sustainable thing to do? What trends are you seeing in the market that is paving the way for a company like Designerex?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the new consumer. Millennials and Gen Z, they're hyper aware of what they're buying and who they're buying it from, and the impact they're having on the environment, for example. So the new consumer, they're definitely wanting to purchase from companies who have, a purpose behind their business as well. So, and I guess looking back, I'm a millennial. I was looking at that dress and I just didn't want to waste it, and I didn't want to waste my money. I just thought it was a big waste, to be honest. I definitely think it's the new consumer. They're much more aware. I guess also technology has enabled them to be more aware in terms of being able to access, data around this. Every, few seconds there's a truckload of clothing being dumped in landfill.
And do you think these large retailing companies are eventually going to wake up to the need for sustainability in fashion?
Yeah, I definitely think it will be kind of not who's kind of has a sustainable element to their business, but who doesn't. So I think they'll kind of be caught out for that. Yeah, I think it's going to move there pretty quickly.
How do these companies evolve? I mean, they've already built a model that's so dependent on churning out fast fashion with very little regard to the environment. How do these companies adapt? Is it something like, acquiring a Designerex in the future, or is it just completely adapting their business model for the new consumer?
Yeah, well, for them to adapt, I think it's not an overnight process, definitely for them. It will be a slow churn for them. But for example, Zara has put out that they want to make sustainable clothing by 2025. So every item of their clothing will be sustainable. So they are moving there. I'm not sure exactly their processes that they're going to do. I guess use better quality materials that actually decompose and things like that.
And pay people a living wage as well.
Absolutely.
Which is
Yeah,
the
so
Nike
the environment,
scandal.
but also treating people the way they need. Yeah.
Awesome. So what are your future plans now for growth for the company? What does the next few years look like for Designerex?
Yeah, so I guess continuing our growth here in Australia and definitely focusing on the US, growing that. But from day one, we've had a global vision, so definitely looking at other markets to go into. We really want to be a global dress hire solution. Wherever a woman is or wherever she's travelling, she can book a dress just like she books an Uber or an Airbnb.
Just peeling back the layers from that question as well, it sounds like there's a big requirement for efficiency in your supply chain and delivery processes to get those dresses, from one part of the globe to another, should that be what people want. If someone wanted a dress in the US, now that you've opened there from Australia, for example, what does the process look like? Do you handle the logistics behind all that, or is that with the lister and the consumer to handle that?
So Australians only transact between each other in Australia.
Sure.
And Americans will only transact and so on. And if you're in the UK, you'll just transact within your own country. Just because it's a rental, it's a 4-day rental, so we don't allow rentals cross border. But yeah, we provide as many tools as possible on the platform, so we have tracking facilities and we make it as easy as possible for our users to receive the dress and make money and save money and wear the dress, and everyone's happy.
What's involved in building a supply chain like that?
Yeah, well, so as a company for us, we don't touch the dresses and we don't see them, just to ensure it's as efficient as possible and the user gets it as soon as possible. So it's just in the whole custom built platform where, a booking is accepted or declined, and then there's a lot of reminders and notifications going on in the platform. And users will enter their tracking number into the platform so they can track it from start to finish.
Okay. So, Kirsten, we're going to wrap up soon, but I want to touch on a subject that it looks like you're quite passionate about. You wrote an article in Startup Daily recently about being a woman in the industry, and you had some great tips in there for some of the women founders out there. Things like turning up with confidence and maintaining a level of self-awareness and reflection, having empathy, leaning in and connecting with other female founders. What inspired you to write that piece? Was it an experience that you had yourself being in the industry?
Yeah, I guess my experiences have been literally from speaking to other women in tech, and the difficulties they encounter and we encounter, and so I really wanted to just share my learnings, I guess, because I did start very shy and didn't really back myself, but in the past 10 years I'm quite confident now. And have learnt a lot by leaning on my peers, in the tech industry, and in particular females. We have very similar, experiences and issues that we talk about. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
And coming around full circle as well, the last piece of advice you wrote in that article was acknowledge your role models. You mentioned early on in the podcast that your mom is a big role model for yourself. What does she think about you today? What does she think about, Kirsten, the startup founder who's raised a bunch of capital, who's now in the US?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's proud, obviously. Yeah, definitely. And she's always just supported me. Like, if I say I want to do something, she's like, okay, that's a good idea, Kirsten, go for it. So always very open-minded, never pushed me to, for example, go to uni, which was never something I wanted to do. So, yeah, just full support of your family is amazing. And I feel very privileged to have that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten, for being on the podcast. It was great having you here.
Thank you.
I definitely learned a lot. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Jason.
Awesome.
Thanks.